Already, I think that I've thoroughly made up my mind about what this headphone is. I do want to take a few days, listen to it, let the excitement die down over this, and really compare against some other headphones over the next few days before I do a full review of this guy. However, here are my preliminary thoughts on the Diana TC, which I've had for just under 24 hours. So I pretty much avoid comparing headphones and speakers. And the reason why is because I feel like 9 times out of 10, the comparisons make no sense whatsoever. But I actually think that I'm gonna break this rule today. You know what this headphone really sounds like? This sounds like a pair of Genelec The Ones. If you're familiar with those speakers, they're a very high-end, very popular choice for studio users. They sound ridiculous. They sound so good. Now, there are some obvious differences, of course. Mainly, of course, sound staging and presentation is very different on a speaker than any pair of headphones. But what things sound like is very similar on here. This is the closest headphone that I've heard to this sound. It's super precise, richly vibrant, exacting, with an unparalleled treble and mid-range performance. It's really incredible. The first time I heard those, I really began to understand what it was to hear someone's voice and not hear the speaker. And I felt like I had the same kind of realization with this headphone. And I think getting that level of precision in a small personal package like this has not really happened before. So I'm very impressed with this headphone. Now we should talk about some of the physical changes that have happened to this headphone, because there's actually quite a few, and actually Abyss changes in general. So probably first and foremost is a slight refresh of this design. One, they've added a new pad, and to accommodate that pad, they've actually made the angle of this driver slightly more aggressive than it was before. The pads are slightly bigger, a little bit more plush. They're actually, in my opinion, a nice upgrade over the previous pads. I don't think anybody's really going to complain about this fitment difference. I think for more heads, this will actually fit a little bit better than the previous gen did. Also in the headband, on the bottom, they've added these 2 sections of slightly more padding. I still think I prefer the additional pad that you can buy separately for this thing, but it is a little bit more comfortable than it was. It's not quite so flat on the top. Now, actually something that is a pretty big deal is they've completely discontinued the Diana Phi. So they only have 2 right now, the Diana V2, which is this one, and the Diana TC, which is obviously this one. In a second, I am going to talk about how this new Diana TC compares against every Abyss headphone, including the Phi, but I think this is probably a smart move. That headphone doesn't really need to exist at this point. Now, last thing, I want to talk about this color. This is going to be a love it or hate it color. They call it bronze, dark bronze. It's not really bronze. It's more like a chocolate brown, kind of a Hershey's brown color, with some tan accents here and there. In photos and video, I don't love the look of this thing, but in person, it actually does look really nice. And I'm probably surprising myself more than anybody else, but I actually think it looks pretty wonderful. Okay, so they did it. They stuck the AB1266 driver into the Diana chassis, which has resulted in this headphone. So let's talk about how this headphone compares to the AB1266, as well as the Phi and the V2. So this shares the most sonic characteristics with the 1266, to nobody's surprise, but there are a couple kind of differences actually between the two, and they might matter to the right customers. One of them is sound staging. Now this probably has a lot to do with driver proximity to the ear, the Diana obviously being a lot closer, but the sound staging on the 1266 is a little bit wider. However, even though the mid-range on the 1266 is excellent, I think I actually prefer the Diana TC by quite a bit. One, it's a little bit warmed up in the lower mid-range, and it's actually a tad less forward in the upper mids than the 1266 is. The 1266 from time to time actually felt a little bit like too strong in the S's and the T's. It didn't happen very often, but it did happen sometimes. The whole vocal range is just a masterclass on the TC though. This headphone for vocals is just really incredible, and vocals feel even more complete, even more intimate, and even fuller, more detailed than the 1266. And that vocal positioning and intimacy and frequency response, I think, is the biggest difference maker between these two. Now, the bass response, I think probably due to the pad properties, is a little bit stronger on the 1266. However, it's very good with the Diana TC. Like it's quite good. But I actually feel like the treble is a little bit more detailed and more transient than the 1266 is. I feel like this is actually a better treble performing headphone than this. I'm not sure if that again is due to the physical properties or some sort of tuning property of the chassis itself. This felt like it pushed the treble a little bit more forward towards you, whereas this felt like things were just exactly how they would appear in real life. They're there, they're rich, they're engaging, they're vibrant, they're glittery, like I like to say a lot, but it's not pushed at all. It's just right on the money, I think. Now, the Diana Phi. Quite frankly, I feel like this headphone is kind of been made irrelevant due to the TC's existence. And it would appear, due to Abyss kind of discontinuing this headphone, that they would feel the same way. Now, even if these two headphones were available at the same time, I think the additional cost of the TC would absolutely be worth it. And here's the reason why. Basically, the TC has stronger bass performance, a taller sound scale, faster treble response by quite a lot. It has much better mid-range fulfillment, and it really ends up making the Phi just not make a whole lot of sense. I feel like in every single category of sound and comfort, this headphone is superior to the Phi. Phi is a great headphone. I just feel like the TC is just that much better. Now the Diana V2. This headphone, I think, really deserves to stay in the line for a couple reasons. One, the price difference between these two is actually quite large and could be the deciding factor for a person looking at an Abyss headphone, the TC costing quite a bit more than the V2 does. But I also do feel like these have very different sound properties and have two different takes while still being very good for their respective reasons. I do feel like they are different enough that you may have a preference. I think that depending on preference, a lot of people actually might prefer the V2 because it's a slightly slower, slightly warmer sounding headphone, and it feels very engaging. It feels very rich and lush, and that's kind of the sound signature that you get out of this. Whereas this just feels correct, clear, just incredibly precise in a way that this headphone doesn't quite match. Vocals specifically are an area that I like both headphones. This headphone has less of a technical precision to it. Now the TC is a much faster sounding driver. It also has what I consider to be a slightly cleaned up mid-range response, being more detailed and probably more even than this headphone is. And it also has this weird ability to keep positional focus, and that was one of the traits that I felt was also very similar to the Genelex. It was like the entire voice is specified in an area and it doesn't exceed that boundary at all. Whereas this headphone has really, really good mid-range focus, but the background instruments tend to take a large step back. It does separation very well, but you're always forced into that separation. Whereas this, I feel it can separate equally as well, perhaps even better, but those background instruments still feel very, very alive, even though the separation is still really incredible. This is a feat that is very difficult for headphones to do. This thing, I think, really pulls it off. The TC also has better sound staging, better sub-bass response, and an all-around more exacting sound. But because the price difference, I feel like they are both justified in existing in this line simultaneously. I don't feel like either one is stepping on the other's territory like I did with the Phi. So conclusion, like I said, I've had this thing for a little under 24 hours now, and I'm very pumped about this thing. I am very excited about the sound. I'm very excited to continue listening to this headphone. So in a little while, I'll have more to report, so subscribe if you're not already for that. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.